Welcome to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, your go-to source for insightful interviews and dynamic panel discussions in the worlds of treasury, banking, payments, fintech, and much more. Here now is your host, the Treasury Whisperer, Seth Marlowe. Hello, Whisperees. Joining me today in the Whisperer studio is Leo Gill. Leo is the Vice President of Product at Bottom Line, a global leader in business payments. He leads the cash management and payments product at Bottom Line, working closely with corporate clients around the globe to develop innovations that help them achieve greater control and visibility over their cash and become more efficient. He has more than 20 years of experience in the software industry, leading product and development teams primarily focused on financial technology services. He's also an acclaimed thought leader in the space. And Leo, I'd like to welcome you to the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast.
Thank you, Seth. Glad to be here with you and with the Whisperees.
That's right. Thank you. So as we were just talking in our preparations for the podcast, talk to us a little bit about Bottom Line. I think depending on where people sit in the industry, they may have different ideas as to what Bottom Line offers, and it offers a lot of different things to different constituents in the treasury, banking, and payments space. So maybe you could give a broad brushstrokes around Bottom Line.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Seth. So, Bottom Line, we've been in the business for 35 years, really strong payments company, global presence. We've worked with lots of corporates, hundreds of thousands of corporates globally on exactly these problems you talked about. So payments, cash management, treasury. We also work really closely with banks as well. So offering our solutions to banks so they can offer their products and services to their corporate clients. In a way, Bottom Line is a pretty broad company, but we solve these very specific problems, right? It's payments automation, managing the complexity of payments globally. We have a settlement network called PayModeX that helps companies pay their suppliers in a simple way. So, it's a pretty broad and strong set of capabilities we have, and there have been added along the years for helping corporates and banks really automate payments and cash management globally.
Thank you for sharing that. And so your role on the product side is on the cash management and payments solutions. To talk to us a little bit about what is comprised in that arena.
Yeah, for sure. So our cash management solution is, sometimes I mix between cash management and treasury because it's a cash management solution with lots of strong treasury capabilities. So we help treasurers manage cash globally with cash visibility, connecting to all of their banks, bringing all of their cash and manage it in one place with cash forecasting, reconciliation, instrument management, and so on. Part of the solution, what it does, it helps corporates automate their treasury capabilities. The great luck we have is that solution sits on top of Bottom Line's strong payments capability. So as you know, payments are going hand to hand with treasury. Nowadays, treasurers are getting more and more strategic, getting more involved in payments. So we bring in all of our global payments capabilities that helps them automate all of the payments globally, including transfers and moving funds across all of their accounts. So my role today as a product manager and head of product for those solutions really work closely with corporates and with our bank partners to develop solutions and help treasurers get more strategic, bring in new solutions, bring in more capabilities to help them automate their processes and just have a better control of their cash.
Right. So it's kind of plays in the treasury management system space, right?
Yeah, for sure. If you look at the set of capabilities that we have, it goes, of course, from your typical cash management, cash visibility, cash forecasting, reconciliation, but it gets into, managing data instruments, investment instruments, things like multilateral netting, right? So a little bit more niche capabilities in treasury. So we have quite a broad set of capabilities in the product because, as you know, the waters in treasury gets deep really quickly, right? So, the minute treasurer starts leveraging the solution for cash forecasting, they're looking only at account balances, but weight. They also have funds and instruments, and they have data instruments that they want to be able to see all of that together with their forecasts and understand where the company is going, and really, forecast based on additional assets, right? So that's where we can get deeper into those areas to help them really give a broad and centralized visibility of all of their capital structure of the organization.
I think sometimes it's lost on people when there's all this talk around cash flow forecasting that it's not just the components of AR and AP, although those
Mhm.
are very important, but
Right.
there are the treasury controlled functions around investment portfolios, debt portfolios, derivative activities that are going on, and
Mhm.
those all have cash flows.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
and so those really do need to feed it, and there's a complexity there that is not all that well understood by people that are outside um, the treasury space. So
Exactly.
it's very very much needed to be able to have a complete picture of the forecast. So Treasury, I think, is in a very interesting place today. It like everybody is grappling with how do I leverage AI? How do I think about and do I want to leverage things in the digital asset space? And in addition to all of that, there's been this continuum for the last number of years of it going from being what seemed like a back office function to more of a strategic function. And how does that play out in your mind as treasurers are trying to be more strategic, but they're also trying to figure out how do I loop in AI, stable coins, new payment rails? There's so much to do, and usually they've got limited staffs to do it.
We've been on this journey of embedding intelligence in our applications for many years at Bottom Line, right? So as all of these AI tools become more available and easier to use, has been pretty easy for us to incorporate them as part of the workflows that we have. Now, one of the things that we've been really strong and focused on is to use AI with a purpose, right? Because as you know, today it's pretty easy to sign up for ChatGPT, load a spreadsheet, and try to get something out of it, which of course opens up all sorts of compliance and regulatory risks where you're uploading your data potentially to a place where you shouldn't, where there's not the proper controls around that data. But what we've been doing along the years is to look at where intelligence, including AI, can come in to products to help treasurers almost as another member of the team, right? So the focus
Mhm.
is not to replace the treasurer, right, but to give them the capabilities that now they feel like they have another team member or a group of people or another whole team as part of the treasury organization. So to put it in plain terms, as an example, we have embedded AI in our cash forecasting solution, right? So both for predicting balances, but also predicting when payments actually hit the bank account or when payments actually leave your account. As you know, unfortunately, a lot of treasurers are forecasting on due dates, right? Rarely due dates are accurate, right? You could send an
That's
invoice
correct.
out with net 30, but your client rarely will pay you, net 30, or sometimes they do, but it's not an accurate representation of it. So that's where we use AI to actually build models and predict when payments will actually hit so we can make the forecast more accurate. See, like we're looking at, instead of just using AI for the sake of AI, we're leveraging AI to enhance a capability that we know will help the treasurer become more efficient and more accurate. So that's really the way we look at it, is embedding more intelligence. Of course, we've been leveraging LLMs as an easier way to access data, right? So instead of navigating through the application, as an example, a treasurer can simply just ask questions: What's my account balance for a certain account? What's my cash position? Where do I have an exposure? So you can pretty quickly get access to data, but all of it is with the purpose. When the purpose is really to augment the treasury function, not really replace it.
Right. I think data is a big piece of the equation that
Mhm.
also isn't given enough credit. The data is everywhere. And I think the challenge a lot of treasurers have, if they've implemented a treasury platform, well, it's probably not integrated fully with their ERP platform.
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of the details around AR and AP. And as you mentioned, did payments actually get made by customers on time, or were they late? Same thing with on the payable side. Did that company actually pay their vendors on time, or did they take advantage of discounts? So trying to get the connection to all of the data seems to be one of the challenges out there. How do you think treasurers and CFOs can go about solving for that?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the biggest challenges you said is where data is everywhere, right? And interesting enough, in my 20 plus years of bottom line, it's something we've been working on for a long time, right? Either integrating with banking back office systems or integrating with corporate ERPs or any other systems that corporates have. And it's a lot of work, right? It's, they're always, that to me is typically the biggest challenge. The good thing is we've been doing this for so long, and it's almost like we've learned a lot. And for us, it's almost like, to quote the Godfather, one of the Godfather quotes, where it says, "It's the life we've chosen." So that's part of
I love that.
our day to day, right? It's really the life we've chosen. So we have a set of, in our platforms, pretty interestingly, we built a set of capabilities that can do these integrations quickly. So for instance, like our development teams aren't typically writing code to integrate with an ERP. They're leveraging tools that we built along the years where they can use a no code to low code solution to build those integrations that make us a lot more efficient. So all of this, of course, has been through building capabilities, working with clients along many years. So we built this portfolio of intellectual property almost of how to integrate with these systems. But going back to your AI point, right, that's also a point that it's overlooked when folks are trying to use AI. Is great, but now you have the data in different places and they're getting updated, even though you may pull your data from your ERP at one point in the morning or in the middle of the day, or you pulled your statement from your bank. Once the day goes by, now you had payments that got posted, you had debits and credits against the account. By the time you were done, or by the time you get to the middle of the day, it already changed, right? So that's really a big challenge for everybody. I completely agree with you. But again, it's something we've been living every day. We feel like it's just part of our job.
I think we're all trying to get to real-time access to real-time data. I think there's more pressure now than ever before because there's so much focus on it. So even if you have the connectivity, are you connecting to a platform that's still very much running in a batch mode? And
Right.
so to your point, you've got the latest update, but that's the latest update as of the time that particular system was last updated, which may have been earlier today, could have been last night. I think for a lot of organizations, I think it's a pipe dream to get all of this to near real time. I don't think we'll ever get to real time.
Yeah. The biggest challenge that we see is the banking infrastructure evolving more to real time. Our solution, as an example, we support real time statements and balances and transactions in the product. But it all depends on the banks. Some of our banking partners, they can provide the data in real time, so we can achieve that in real time for corporate clients. But unfortunately, the vast majority of the banks don't really support real time balances and transactions. So we're still relying on prior day balances. But to a point, even prior day sometimes to some corporates still great because they're going to banking portals and downloading data and downloading spreadsheets and try to cobble together. It may take them a couple days, right? If you have 60, 80 banks, like you're probably getting that data from different banking portals and try to combine it together. It could be quite challenging to just get your cash position on a daily basis might be pretty challenging. So that's where we see a lot is really the banking infrastructure getting better, which has been for a lot of banks, but there's still a lot of ground cover.
I can't agree with you more. I think when you consider the landscape of 4,000 plus banks in the U.S. and another 4,000 plus credit unions in the U.S., what corporate doesn't have at least one account sitting somewhere at a credit union for some unforeknown reason?
Right.
They're all in different states of capability, and as much as APIs are nothing new. Some are, way ahead of the curve. Others are way behind it. It's kind of the luck of the draw of who you're banking with. If you're with more progressive organizations or big four or big 10 banks, chances are you've got the capability. Once you ratchet down from there, it's kind of a crapshoot as to what kind of capability you're going to be able to plug into.
We have lots of clients in the real estate space, for example, right? It's very common for real estate space to have accounts across 30 banks, 40 banks, right? Because if you're managing multiple properties in different states, as you said, they bought properties and acquired them as part of the portfolio, the bank accounts and the bank relationships come with them. So that's really a big challenge. We see when we work with a lot of these corporates is how do you get access to that data on your own versus leveraging a treasury solution to help you with that.
Sure. So I want to step back to
Mhm.
the AI question a little bit. I think when AI is talked about in Treasury, the first use case it's always put out there is cash forecasting.
Mhm.
What other major use cases do you see out there that treasurers and their teams are explicitly asking for, or that you're recommending to those Treasury teams to focus on?
Yeah, one really strong one that I see is on payment anomaly detection. And if you read the NACHA 2026 guidelines, NACHA is really pushing corporates to be more vigilant when it comes to fraud and payment security, right? So that's one area we've been working quite a lot is leveraging AI to basically run anomaly detection across payments. And it's not just for fraud, if you think about it, right? Because if you're sending a payment and maybe someone picked the wrong payment type, right? You typically pay, a supplier over ACH, but someone is paying over wire. So you might be paying a different fee that you were expecting to pay. Or maybe someone forgot to put a code on a payment because say you have like an in-house banking solution on the other side and you need to get the code back in order to properly account for the payment in your system. Those pieces are also anomalous and those are errors. So what we're doing is leveraging AI to understand how specific companies make payments in their organization. So who they pay, how they pay, when they pay, what's the structure of that payment in order to try to catch those potential errors or even fraud early on. So we've had a lot of success with these offerings because it's really difficult, right? You can imagine you have corporates who are doing thousands of payments on a daily basis. How do you know that someone didn't make a mistake, or how do you know that maybe it wasn't potential fraudulent, not either internal fraud, but also maybe someone was lured to
Hmm.
make a payment, right, to a wrong person. So that's really one key area that we see evolving a lot with AI is on payments security today.
Yeah, I think that's really important because there are just so many. I like the fact that you're calling it anomaly detection because it really can be so many things that have absolutely nothing to do with fraud, but
Exactly.
can end up creating a lot of back end work for reconciliation and other things if payments aren't done the proper way. And having lived it in prior lives of mine,
Hmm.
I would always shudder on the week that someone that is in the role of what we used to historically call the cash desk person that would manage the day-to-day position and initiate most of the wires in ACH. When that person is out on vacation, well, the backup, you hope that they've been really trained well because that's when a lot of
Right.
anomalies end up happening.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Really, as you said, things like, are you paying from the account that you should really pay from, right? If you have thousands of bank accounts, maybe someone picked the wrong account to initiate a payment from. So, like you said, the cash manager who's maybe on vacation would have caught that early on, right? If they saw the payment come through, that's seeing that someone picked the wrong account for that payment, but maybe not. If that person is out, now it just changes the whole dynamic in your organization. Your processes are out the window because just a simple mistake could
Hmm.
happen.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that some of the vendors in the space are kind of pushing out there about the AI capabilities that exist today?
I would say really, historically, as we started leveraging intelligence, and then now with AI, this perception of AI, especially in the treasury space, replacing the treasurer, right? I think that's a misunderstanding in a lot of ways. There are going to be definitely capabilities that are going to make the treasury smarter and more effective, but I just don't see it as a complete replacement from the treasurer. You're always going to have the person who is accountable and responsible for managing liquidity in your organization. And these tools, they are going to be helping that person or team, but not really, the autopilot of finance with AI. I think that to me is long ways away, or maybe a misconception that people have today, the way they represent how AI can really be embedded into organizations.
Do you see treasurers and maybe even CFOs that are trying to push this forward, even though their teams aren't really ready yet? And they're saying, well, listen, I need you to give up a certain amount of headcount because, hey, AI is here. It's going to be doing stuff for us. Or are they taking a wait and see approach by and large?
Yeah, we work pretty closely with treasurers, and and also with CFOs as well, right? So what we see is a more of a pragmatic approach to AI with across the board with our clients. So it's, yes, knowing that you can become more efficient, but also holding on a little bit of when it comes to controls of data, right? So for instance, they don't really want anyone loading their financial statements into ChatGPT without controls of that data, right? So that's where they're typically coming to partners like us to try to figure out together how to leverage AI in a secure way. What are the more pragmatic and purposeful solutions that they can implement in their teams to help them automate and become more efficient? I haven't heard of much of replacing headcount on a treasury teams. It's a little bit of the opposite. What I hear is more of, I want my treasury team to be more strategic, right? Right now they're buried in building cash positions. They're buried in updating forecasts. They're buried in reconciling forecasts and actuals and reconciling bank accounts. They're buried in all of these processes that if I have a strategic decision I need to make in the organization, they can't help me, right? So if a CFO walks into a treasury office and says, we have this great opportunity of, an acquisition of this company, where are we going to get the cash from, right? The treasurer could be that person who's going to be
Hmm.
strategic and better understand where should you move cash and how to do it quickly in order to capitalize on the opportunity that was presented to you by your CFO. So I feel a lot of time it will be daunting to be a treasurer and ask and be asked the question from your CFO, how can you help the company move forward? And no, you can't do it because you're buried in all of the data, in all of this day to day, all of these day to day activities they do. To answer your question, I think what I see is more of this pragmatic approach. I see a lot of CFOs want more from their treasury team, but know that they are just buried and doing a lot of day to day. So, and that's what we try to help them, like get their heads up a little bit outside of what they're doing manually, and automate the processes for them.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard because especially today, there are so many headlines of companies, and frankly, most of them, I think, in the tech space,
Mhm.
where there's layoff of back office people, there's layoffs of IT people because of all of the coding capabilities now that can be done out of some of these AI platforms.
Mhm.
So I think that puts an artificial perspective out there of,
It does.
hey, this can easily be done, but I think there are going to be some organizations that never actually fulfill all those cuts because they're going to realize that they still need people to do a lot of this work.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about it, even especially a bottom line, the way we've looked at it is that we have thousands of corporate clients, thousands of bank partners and clients as well. There isn't a single product roadmap that it's not really long. And we'd love to accelerate our product roadmap. So the strategy I would suggest is more of, how can you actually accelerate your roadmap using these AI solutions versus just looking at cost savings as the action. Because cost savings will be great for short-term gain, potentially with investors and your board, but ultimately you need a material growth, right? And constant growth, not necessarily just one drop in expenses because you reduce your headcount, but you need to be able to show that growth. So that's where I see a lot of companies now transitioning a little bit of this thought of leveraging AI to reduce headcount, more of, let's leverage AI to do more and help more of our clients and do it better and faster.
It's a great point. I think most treasury teams, if you ask them, even aside from the product roadmaps of the vendors that they're using, they're looking at their own project lists of all the things that they want to try to accomplish, some of which may not be from a technical perspective at all. It may be some cash flow optimization. It may be looking at different ways of breaking up the way Treasury operates, or their relationships with the AR and AP teams, or people out, if they're large enough that they have divisions or subsidiaries, what those interactions look like. So there's an inordinate amount of work to be done that usually those lists don't change a whole lot from year to year.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and lots of treasury teams. I don't know many treasury teams who say I can just pick up the phone and call my internal IT team and they'll do what I ask right away. Right? I haven't seen that exist. Right? It's always I need to schedule in my IT team and with a project manager, and I can only do this integration at 3 months from now, right? Because I need the IT team to allocate capacity. So I think that's where the AI tools will help, is that if those IT teams are more efficient, they can do more faster, then these projects get really unlocked for Treasury across the board.
I can't begin to tell you some of the battles I would have with IT. And having come from IT at one point in my career, it used to drive me absolutely crazy. But it just was like, especially for the little things, there was no room to fit in the little things because, that might impact this
Right.
one big project that everybody's got their eyes on. No, can we just get one person I need a script that will save me in an hour a day. Can you just,
Right.
it's impossible.
Exactly.
So what about on the fraud front? It seems that is a challenge that just when you think you've gotten all your people trained, everybody knows the things to look out for. The deep fakes get better. The schemes that the fraudsters are dealing with, that are putting out in front of Treasury teams and forget it, certainly consumers as well. They just are better and better at this all the time. How do we get in front of the fight against fraud?
As we talked a little bit about anomaly detection, I think that to me is really a really big step towards it, because it's very difficult. As you said, there's lots of different types of attacks. Like we've seen deep fakes causing people to send payments because they think the CEO is asking for a payment to be made immediately. All of that is where I think anomaly detection can help, because typically, that payment wouldn't have been made on that time, of that day, of that day of the month, of that amount to that particular account, right? So there are all of these different signals that you can draw from payments and from doing anomaly detection that you can get ahead of it. So you're spot on. I think fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated. And interesting enough, also what we see is fraudsters used to go, after, what's that saying? Like, why did the bank robber rob the banks? Because that's where the money is, right? So they're typically going after the large corporates, or we're going after the large corporates or the large ticket items, right? So large sums of money. But now what we see a lot is the small fraud across a broader range, right? So it's small dollars where you can almost be like not even be caught, because it's just a couple $100 here and there over a long period of time, over lots of different companies. And a lot of times those companies are quite small, right? Well, before, if you are a SMB, right? If you're a mid-market company and you feel like, well, fraudsters are not going to come after our business because we're too small. Well, think again, because that's exactly what they're doing, right? Because they know that's where those companies lack most controls, or don't have as strong controls as the large corporates, and they're not being able to look at these small ticket items, small fraud that will come in on a regular basis and catch it. So I think it's quite challenging, and it would always be challenging for a long time. As you know, Treasury goes really hand to hand with compliance, security, and fraud, right? It's really part of what the treasurer's responsibility in a lot of ways is, and it can be pretty daunting if you try to do all of this by yourself.
No, it's so true. And I think one of the challenges, particularly, I think in the AP space, because I think that little bit of a difference being really usually outside the direct responsibility of Treasury. In AP, there just tends to be more turnover, generally more junior people who haven't seen as much. And there needs to be like a constant effort to emphasize if something doesn't feel right, it doesn't smell right, say something. Sort of like we learned after 9/11, see something, say something. Those rules are so important today, more so than ever, regardless of who's instructing you to do something.
Right.
You can't
Exactly.
take anybody's guidance. I've certainly seen over the years internal fraud as well, and those are situations where sometimes you just my boss told me.
Right.
It's kind of hard to look your boss
Exactly.
in the eye and say, I can't do this. In the realm of these treasury and cash management systems, I think the thing that a lot of us have seen is that sometimes these implementations and projects get to have birthdays or anniversaries. Why is it that sometimes these implementations still take so long to get done?
Yeah, quite an interesting question, right? And we've seen we've had clients come to us because they were exactly in the same place that you've just said, where they bought a treasury solution, and typically a lot of times you have to hire a third party to implement that treasury solution in your organization, and it just takes a lot of time, right? Because there's a lot of meetings and projects and separate interests sometimes, right? Where the third party may be to their benefit that takes a little bit extra time because they're getting paid per hour to implement the solution, right? So
That's right.
so you have what's the interest really of the third party who's implementing? Is it to really get a quick project and get you onboarded right away? And then by the time it's onboarded and you have a problem, what happens when you try to call somebody? They're gone, right? So now you have to reach to another group of people who didn't implement your solution, who don't know who you are, and need to get up to speed with how you use a solution, which takes even more time. So it's not just the implementation, but the maintenance and support and everything else. I would say that's really one of the biggest issues that we've seen. At Bottom Line, we follow a different approach. We have our own teams implement the solution. So it's bottom line employees from day one to as you go and grow with us. So our own team implements the solution. There's not a third party involved. We handle everything with clients from a configuration, onboarding, getting the solution up and running from them and supporting them from that point forward, which has been really well received by our clients because they know if they're calling support, it's the same company and the same team that also
Hmm.
worked on implementation, that, also the same person who sold you the solution. So that's typically where we see it, one big area. And the second area, a lot of times, is folks trying to boil the ocean, right? So
Hmm.
and that's what we focus a lot with our clients is let's get up to speed, and we in our solution is cloud based. So for us is let's get up to speed within a few weeks and get the solution up and running for you. We can get all of the bank data through Swift. We can handle all of that really quickly within a matter of a month or even around that time. So get all of the data in, get your cash visibility. Then we start working on forecasting and everything else together with you, but you're actually using the solution, right? So you're not having to go back as a treasurer to your CFO and say, oh, we're not using the solution yet because we're still going through implementation. It's almost like, no, we're already using it and we're implementing these other pieces as we are growing and actually show real ROI really quickly. So I think that's really the what I've seen. A lot of the challenges is really just involving more people, involving more organizations is why it takes so long.
As you mentioned Swift, couldn't help but thinking with all the advances of so many of the banks that have gone down the API connectivity route, are you seeing a decline in the corporate use of Swift, or is that as popular a mechanism today as it's been over, let's say, the last, I say, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, no, it's still very popular. Interesting enough, in the US, most banks are not Swift members, right? As you said, we have 9,500 financial institutions in the US, and the vast majority of them are not Swift members. But globally, we see a lot of Swift, traffic. Like today, Bottom Line, we're the third or one of the top three Swift providers in the world, and one of the other providers is actually Swift themselves. So we actually have seen quite a lot of growth, especially in organizations that are global, have lots of accounts globally, because we are a Swift member and we have Swift bureaus. We can pull in all of the data really quickly, right? So instead of integrating to 80 banks over APIs, it's one integration channel from Bottom Line to Swift, and all of the data comes in right away, right through one pipe. So that's where I've seen there's still quite a lot of growth in their area. But you're right to point out that banks are getting better with APIs. We've integrated with lots of banks over APIs. What we see is typically, as you said, your top 10 banks, your top 10 tier one banks
Hmm.
globally have APIs that we can integrate with, and we've done that too. But for us, we just want to get the data and this customer onboarded quickly. So whichever means we can use to get the data in, we'll do them, right? So if it's going through Swift, we'll do that. If it's Swift, a combination of Swift and host-to-host connectivity via file or via API, we'll do that too. It's a combination today, and I don't see that reducing very much in the foreseeable future either.
That's good news for Swift. And frankly, having been one of those people when I was at GE who was pushing so hard to
Mhm.
get Swift to open their network to corporates because
Yeah.
that wasn't a thing going back 20 years ago. Actually, probably a little bit longer than that. I'm glad that it's still being leveraged as much as it is because it was a game changer
Mhm.
for us at GE back in those days.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about when you encounter and your teams at Bottom Line encounter treasury teams that are looking to buy a new solution. What do you think the biggest things are that they really need to know before they decide which vendor, which solution they're going to go with?
Mhm. Yeah, I think having a strong roadmap for what you want to do and not boil the ocean, right? So have a really well-defined roadmap of what do you want to get up and running at what point in time. So having a really clear vision of that is really critical to any treasury organization. The second part is really the biggest part is what are all of your systems you have, your ERPs, your back office systems that we need to integrate with, and your banks, right? So a lot of times you may have 40, 50, 60 banks. You need to be able to go, if you're not using Swift, but, engage with those banks to be able to get contracts in place, to be able to bring in the data into a treasury solution. I think having that understanding up front, and also, do you really need all of your banks right day one, or do you just concentrate on your concentrating banks first and knowing that you can bring in more banks as you progress? And that to me have been a developer and running engineering teams to me is common because it's an iterative approach, right?
Right.
You don't want to wait for a big bang of releasing software. And I think in the treasury world, it's the same thing. You don't want to wait for a big bang of getting everything live day one. Almost, can you do like an iterative approach that you can prove that the vendor works well, you can prove internally that the investment was well warranted, and you can show ROI right away, right? So I think that's what I would recommend anyone who's trying to get into this journey today.
Sure. So last question around all of this. So what are some of the classic treasury technology mistakes that companies continue to repeat?
Yeah, I think overlooking the integration issue, I think it's a big one, right? Because a lot of times, not just the systems that you want to integrate and bring the data from, but you have the understanding of how the data is organized in those systems in order to bring in the data. So not spending that time up front inside your organization, internally with your IT team, to really understand how are our ERPs configured, which ones do we need, which other internal systems we may have data that we need to bring into a treasure solution. I think that's one to me. People sometimes jump too quickly into,
Hmm.
oh, we already have cash balances, so let's just get the forecast in. But okay, great. But now we need IEP, AR, all of the other information that you should have in your ERP together. And maybe it wasn't something you spent time or the right amount of time to plan for. I think that's really the number one issue that I see it happening. And number two is sometimes just thinking that just not wanting to bring in all of your banks and bank accounts immediately either, right? Even though I said before, can you bring in in iteration, just keep bringing banks online, but you want to bring all of the banks in, right? You don't want to leave any data behind. So you have to have a really clear roadmap of when do you want to bring all of your banks and how, and what's your expectation of that time, of that duration for your roadmap to do.
Yeah, I think it's an awful lot easier when you're working with an organization that's starting from, I don't want to say nothing, but they're starting from a very manual process. And then when they're first starting their first treasury system, they see the biggest gains, and there's probably more willingness to go through that iterative approach. Whereas if they've got something already and they're making a major change, well, they've got something. And I think there's always this fear that, well, I'm going to take 2 steps backwards in my approach of moving 3 steps ahead, that I'm going to have this period of uncertainty where I don't have it all. So I want it all now. And
Right, exactly.
we're in that want it all now society as it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you think about like the migration of and we've seen it a lot, is migration from an existing system to a new system, right? So for
Yeah.
us is a new implementation, but they're migrating from an existing system. A lot of times people get used to bad processes that no one knows why it was implemented, but everybody follows them anyways, you know?
Mm.
So a lot of times is also like understanding, well, we follow this process, but why? And is that really the best process we should follow once we migrate into a new solution? Wanting a like for like, so you're migrating a bad process to a bad process in a new system is not ideally what you're actually looking for, right? I would say that's another mistake I see sometimes, is not not the unwillingness, but just not the true understanding of why processes are put in place in your organization. And if
Mhm.
they're really the best, right? Because maybe it's something that was done 10 years ago and everyone just followed, as you maybe had turnover in the team and just became part of your DNA. But that's what we do. But that's what we do may not be the most efficient way moving forward. So just having more flexibility and understanding about those processes, I think it's key as well.
Great. Well, there you have it, folks. Leo, thank you so much for joining me here
Thank
today
you.
in the Whisperer studio. That is a wrap for us here today, Whisperees. Want to let you know that you can now help support the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast by becoming a Patreon member of the show. You can see the show notes for details about that. Until next time on the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast, I'm Seth Marlowe saying bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast with Seth Marlowe. The Treasury Whisperers Talkcast podcast is produced by the Treasury Whisperer Studio and Treasury Whisperer LLC. Copyright 2025. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this podcast without the express written consent of Treasury Whisperer LLC is strictly prohibited.